Hi everyone, welcome to Pay It Forward. I have for you today the start in a new series that I've been pretty excited about. I've been wanting to get back to basics and back to the joy of a bit of hand sewing and small projects. This is a little series of dolls. Probably can't see her here, you've seen her in the thumbnail. A beautiful little, very, what will I say, an old-fashioned style of doll, bringing some vintage elements into it. But it's going to be part of a series which are all put together in the same way. So if you're enjoying the Cuddle series, this is a little version of that, but made up in a human sort of doll form. We're using a wooden bead each time. Now I've worked out the perfect technique to add a gorgeous little wooden bead head that is secure. I call them play dolls because I'm intending that children from 3 years and up can play with these, and there'll be lots and lots of beautiful little accessories to make with them. We've got the little tiny teddy with this one that I'm going to show you that we've made before actually in our bag charm, and these are made up very simply in the softest flannels, so your little cotton flannelette pajama material. There's quite a few options there. Super simple to make. Now something this small, the way that we put it together, it's really quite clever and it makes it super easy. So there's a little bit of hand sewing in the little hoods. So my intention is that we'll be doing all sorts of little dolls dressed as little animals and characters, and even fruits and vegetables and flowers. So the sky's the limit, and we will also be doing some different sizes to help you utilize those beautiful wooden beads. Now, if you have ever admired little peg dolls, this is along the similar line. These are fantastic for on-selling for those of you who want to create a beautiful little heirloom doll collection. You can definitely do that with these. So this is number one, and of course it's our little doll. This time she's dressed as a little bear. Super cute. So you need to find your pattern. Your free pattern is in the description box below. Just open that drop down description box, you'll find that link. You'll be able to print out your pattern templates on your own home printer. You will need A4 paper and you need to be printing at actual size. Chat to me in the comments if you have any printing problems at all. And I do strongly advise that before we start putting anything together here, if you haven't made any of my creations before, have a look at my cutting and layout video because it sets you up perfectly for fantastic results. I'll put the link at the top of the screen there for you. So all seam allowances are included in my patterns, they always are. So let's get busy making number one in a series of many, I hope, of our little play dolls. So let's get started making one of my beautiful little play dolls made in a bead and felt style. Very, very simple doll and put together in the same way each time. So we'll be making this one over and over in a variety of different styles and different animal sort of costumes. This one is a little bear. So let's start with what we're going to need. So first up, to make the head each time, we use a 30mm wooden bead. So you can see that there, must be 30mm because I've designed the little hats and hoods to fit it perfectly. With that, for our join, you're going to need a 40mm roofing bolt. So have a good look at that one. They're very, very common. Just go to your hardware store, 40mm or 1.5 inches. That goes straight through and creates that perfect little joint to the body. It's very, very safe, it's very durable, and in my opinion, it's the best way to put these little dolls together. It also gives a nice little bit of weight to the head. So then when we go to attach it to the body, we need a 16mm disc. You could use a washer if you can get one the right size. They come in all sorts of sizes, washers, that shouldn't be difficult. But this is a 16mm teddy bear jointing disc, and then of course just the nut to do that up inside the body. So that's our joining mechanism, and it is the same every single time. This is the only way that I put them together. So if you want to work out a way to put them together another way, it's just when you're using a bead this size, gluing isn't going to work. You could put a framework in it. Look, this really is just the easiest way. It's best just to go with this. So once we have those head pieces all organised, we each time put together a little body, and it's a standard body that's put together every time, and it's very easy. I've worked through several ways with this. My intent with this series is that it is very straightforward to put together. You're not doing, even though it's a small project, I'm cutting out a lot of the fiddly work. So while this might look like this isn't making any sense, Lisa, trust me, it will in the end. So these are the pieces for the back of our doll body. And yes, they are just 2 rectangles. There's a reason for that. You've got markings for the opening there. And the fabric that you choose for these bodies needs to be very soft, because we want that floppy sort of posability. It's got to feel nice to the touch, to little hands. For me, flannelette, cotton flannelette is the best. It comes in millions of colours. It's basically a pyjama material. It's soft, it's quite densely woven, so it holds together well. We don't interface this body. Now, other options to use for this, you could use a micro fleece, would work exceptionally well if you can get your hands on it. Again, comes in lots of prints and colours. So just nothing stiff. I would never use just normal printing cottons. They're just too stiff and you won't get that lovely. You'll get creasing rather than that lovely soft flow. So using your templates, those are your 2 back pieces. And then for the front of the doll body, we have 1 large rectangle piece, and you've got marks on your pattern templates. Make sure that you put them in. Of course, that's the same fabric. Now you can change it up by having the back of the doll 1 print, the front of the doll a different colour. You'll work it out as you go along that you can change it up to suit your needs. So basically the concept of these dolls is that they are a little person doll, and they are dressed in an animal type costume, or perhaps it's a nature costume. It might be a flower, it might be a fruit or a vegetable. As I said, in this case, we're making a little bear. So we are going to be making the hoods, the little hats, if you like, are made in felt each time. You could do it in mini bear plush, but felt is best. And in saying that felt is best, what I'm using here today is washable acrylic felt, the one that I nearly always use. But I will say that my preference moving forward will be to use pure wool felt. The reason for that is we don't interface this either. So pure wool felt in a 1 millimetre width is lovely and dense. It holds together better, so that's what I will be using. I have a whole lot of colours on order. They'll be coming, but I am glad of this opportunity to show you that you can make it in the washable acrylic and get a lovely result. So to match this lovely mustardy colour, I'm going for the same colour in the felt. We need 2 side head pieces, nothing added to that felt, and a centre gusset. You've got little slots in the side of the head for the ears. Now the ears, if you're using a washable acrylic felt, I join 2 pieces of felt together with fusible webbing, just a little square of it, fuse it together, and then I cut out my 2 ears from that. I've got the 2 ears here already stitched. You can see they're just blanket stitched there. That lovely neat little blanket stitch. If you're using pure wool felt like this one, you don't have to double it up. You could just make the ears as a single piece because of the density of that felt. And these really are tiny little dolls when it comes to those details. So you should have 2 ears, centre gusset, and your side head pieces. This will change each time, of course, with the doll, because we'll be making things like little dinosaurs, raccoons, all sorts of little animals. So we've got our head pieces, put those aside. I've already got my little ears done, which I will demonstrate to you. Inside of that body, we're going to be filling with a little bit of polyester filling, but in each hand and foot, we're adding a little bead, which we then tie in. The beads are around about 10 to 12 millimeters. They're wooden beads as well. So simple round little bead gets tucked in there. So from there, you can put anything you like with these dolls. What else are we going to need? We're going to need some clear craft glue to glue the top of that hood in place when we get to there. You need your extra strong thread. The little hood is made up with hand sewing, and it's beautiful little tiny buttonhole stitches in a tiny blanket stitch that really make this project a lovely little heirloom doll. So this can really be a great series for you all. You will need some Araldite epoxy glue to glue the bolts onto the little head here. And you will also need some black paint or colour of your choice to paint those little eyes in place. And also some gloss varnish to coat that afterwards. The dolls, the way that I make them, is very, very minimal. So this is the completed head here with the two eyes in place. All I give them are eyes, and then they're peeping out of that little hood each time. Super sweet. The more you add, the more you complicate things. If you feel confident and you want to add a little smile or some blushing on the cheeks, by all means do that. I like to keep it clean and concise because the doll is small. I feel it looks better with just that simplicity. So this one has all been painted and then glossed over. So those little eyes are permanent. If you're worried about getting a perfect little eye like that, I'm going to show you the simplest trick to get it right absolutely every single time. You're also going to need a heat erasable marker for when we trace out our doll body pattern onto our fabrics, and that's about it. So we're going to move forward, and I'm going to show you the construction of the little head, which is the same each time. So let's move ahead and do that. So to make up the little head for all of my little play dolls in this series, they are all made up with a 30mm wooden bead. You can see that one there. They usually come with a varnished finish. It's fine, you can use a varnish finish or you can use a natural bead. It doesn't matter, either way. A coat of varnish over the top will finish it off, but you can still add the eyes to a varnished one and it will still stay on and not be a problem. So first step with these is they are made by machine, so there's often some rough edges. So I just take a little file and make sure that I've got all the edges in there nice and smooth before I start. And then I'm going to take my Araldite, which is my 5-minute epoxy glue. I'm going to pop a small amount of that onto just a scrap of cardboard here. I'm going to take a skewer and mix it all up. And once it's all mixed up, I'm going to take my bolt. This is the same way that I make up my joints. I'm going to take up some of that glue and add it around the inside of the head of that bolt. And then I'm going to drop that bolt straight through. I'm going to pull it down. I'm going to add the 16mm disc and the nut, and that's just going to hold it nice and tight while that glue dries. You can set that aside then to dry. Okay, so once that bolt is dry, we can go ahead and paint the little eyes in place. So I always do it, the painting of the eyes, after I've put the bolt in, because it gives you something to hold on to. So I take, the easiest way to do this, I've got my little bit of black Jo Sonja's. So I'm using just Jo Sonja's Carbon Black. It is just a matte acrylic, artist quality. So I've got a little bit of that, I've got a little bit of water, and I've got my wooden skewer, which has the pointed end and that tiny, tiny little round end that you can see there. Check the end of your skewer, make sure it is a nice, neat round end. And that's what we're going to use. We're not going to use a brush. If you use a brush, you're going to get into all sorts of trouble. We want the perfect circle. Simplest way to do that, first of all, let's measure the eyes. So the eyes sit halfway, right in the middle of your bead, and it might look to you, oh, that's going to be too low down, but we're putting a little hood over here, remember, and coming up underneath the chin, and it's going to sit up over that bolt as well. Every time we make these dolls, the whole top of the bead will be covered with some kind of a hat or a hood. So the measurement between the eyes, the best is anywhere from 1 centimetre to 1¼ centimetres. You don't want it wider than that because the hood will come around and block it. If you want to put them even closer together, you can, but the sweet spot is around about, I would say it's around about 12 millimetres apart. So I've just taken my pencil and marked that in. I've made sure that they're absolutely straight. Easier to do than you think because the wooden beads often have that swirl going around, so you can line that up. So now I'm going to dip the pointed end of my skewer into my paint just to give it a little bit of thinning. I don't want the paint too thick. Give that a mix around. Just turn that around, get rid of that paint on the end. Then I'm going to flip it and I'm going to take my round end and just drop it in. And I'm just going to put one dot. One dot, simple as that. Drop it in and one dot. So if you've ever wondered how people get perfect eyes on peg dolls, that's how they do it. They certainly don't use a brush. So the important thing about this is you really, really, really need to let this dry. If you try and coat this with varnish before it's super dry, of course it's just going to spread. So go ahead, let that dry completely, and then take your gloss varnish with a soft brush, just a simple soft brush, and just coat over the top. And then those little eyes are absolutely permanent. Now I highly recommend that you make up quite a few of these heads at the same time and do it all at once. And you can have a whole little box of them ready to go, all glued up with their bolts and eyes in place. Makes it so much easier for you to reach for one and put it together very, very quickly. So I'm going to let that dry completely and I would coat it as I said, and this is going to be my end result. So it's the same every single time. We will be making these dolls up in even a smaller head and possibly a larger head, but for now this series is based on this 30mm wooden bead. So I have my little bead head complete, and now we're going to start making the hood for the little bear doll. So what I have, my headpiece is ready, and I'm going to start with my ear pieces because they go into the seam of the head. So as I said, although this is small work, I'm making it as easy as possible, always trying to incorporate those ears into the seam and designing it in such a way that it makes it so much easier. So because I'm using the washable acrylic here, I have double felt, which is my two pieces of felt fused together. If you're using pure wool felt, that's a nice dense one, go ahead and just use one layer for these ears, it will be fine. So I've got a single strand of extra strong thread, I'm using Gutermann, and I have a little knot at the end. And I use Gutermann thread throughout this, extra strong upholstery thread, because it just gives you a lovely clean finish. You could use an 8-ply Perle thread, but I think it's getting a little thick myself. So I'm just going to come in at the bottom there and let the knot sit at the base. Remember, that's incorporated into the seam, so we're not going to see that. So what we're sewing here, we're going to start right on that corner, is a tiny little blanket stitch. So I'm taking my needle through all of the layers and I'm bringing my needle out through the loop. pull that first stitch in right on the corner, hold it with my finger, move it around, and I'm going to go through all of those layers. It's a single layer, remember, fused together, and bring my needle out through the loop. So it's exactly the same as your standard blanket stitch, which I've got videos for, but it's tiny. And I would say that it's around about, the stitches are about just 1.5 millimeters apart. And it's just going to really finish off those edges beautifully. For those of you who love doing bead work and, you know, those little embroidery embellishments, you're going to love these dolls because they just lend themselves to all that sort of work. And working with the felt is beautiful, and I have been missing my felt, so hence creating this new series for you all. And I love to do a little bit of hand sewing. So you can see there, each time I'm just taking my needle straight through all the layers and out through the loop each time, and I'm getting just that gorgeous little binding stitch. I'm going to continue on right down to the other side and knot off on the underneath here where it won't be seen, and then do the same with the other ear, and you've got those two prepped and ready, and we can just pop them aside and we can get started on the head. So making our head, we've got our two side head pieces, and they have that little slot there for the ears. So the first thing we're going to do is add those ears, and we're going to put right sides together, and we're going to sit that ear down as low as we can. So tucked in there, make sure it's extending out a little bit so that we're definitely capturing it. So now I've got that little ear sandwiched in between those two layers of that slot there. I'm going to take my needle with my extra strong thread, and I'm just going to stitch that with a tacking stitch, just an overcasting stitch, just to hold that in place. This is the only part of the head that I'm actually going to sew on the machine. I'm just going to sew those ears. Now it's important that that ear is just extending a little beyond the two side pieces so that it's definitely being caught. Right down to that base. And I will do exactly the same with the other ear on the other head piece. Snip that. And now I will take this to my machine and I will stitch from the top nice and close to there, just as small a seam as you can. It's probably only about 2 millimeters, that seam, and just stitch it in and run off the edge at the base there, just like you would a dart. And make sure you back and forth on your start and your finish. I'll do the same with the other side, and I'll come back and I'll show you how that looks. So here's how those little ears should look. So stitched straight down and just veering off the edge here at the base, and then you've got the little ear incorporated into that seam. Really roll that out so that ear is really nicely pushed out there, and same with the other side. Those your little ears will poke out the side of your hood. Okay, so next step is we're going to go ahead and sew in the center head gusset. Now it's important that we always work on the center head gusset. So you're going to take your side head piece, the wider part goes to the front of your hood. The narrower part is at the base of the neck. And we're going to start. Now you can pin this. I actually don't. I simply just line up the edges there because it's such a small little piece, and it is cut to fit perfectly. I've got my extra strong thread, and I'm just going to overcast this into place all the way down. Nice little shallow stitches. I don't want to make that seam too deep. Tiny little stitches just catching it. Again, using the pure wool felt, it's more dense, and so you get less fluffing and fraying, but still totally doable in this washable acrylic. I just prefer the density of the pure wool felt. Once you've used pure wool felt for this, you would never go back. And we can't add interfacing because we need this to be super flexible. So you can see I'm just taking that head gusset and following around the side headpiece right down, and it'll match up beautifully with the back of the neck. So let me just overcast that into place. You can see that centre head gusset stitched from the front. Remember, the widest part of this gusset is the front, and it's stitched. You can see it fits beautifully, and that's the side of the hood, working on the centre head gusset. So now that that's nicely tacked into place, we're actually going to sew the seam. We have to do this by hand, and we're going to sew it with a stab back stitch. So I've got a single strand of extra strong thread. I'm going to keep this seam really tiny. So I'm going to start coming from the underneath, got a little knot in the end of my thread. I've come in, started the length of one stitch. Now I'm going to wrap it around the front and come back from the underneath, back up out of that same hole, that same starting point. And it's really going to anchor in that first stitch at the front of the hood. Now I'm going to go in the length of one stitch. My seam allowance is about 2.5 millimeters. It's quite tiny. So back under and come straight over the top of that same stitch again. So everything's anchored in beautifully. So now I can continue on with my stab back stitch, which is coming from the underneath and going back into the last exit hole each time. So the stitch is completely linked back and front. I have a video that shows you how to sew this stitch. This is a very tiny version, but it's all the same. I'll put the link at the top of your screen there for you to have a look. Most of you by now will be familiar with this stitch, and this is just doing it in a tiny way. And I'm just going to continue on with that stitch, working on the centre head gusset all the way down to the base. Then I'm going to repeat with the opposite side. I'm going to overcast that one into place. I'm going to make sure, again, that I'm working on the head gusset. You can go ahead and turn those head pieces through and really roll out those seams, and you'll find you'll have a gorgeous little teddy bear hood with those little ears poking out. Test it on your little head. That will sit over there beautifully and tuck in around the chin. Cute as a button. So we're not finished yet though. So many people will skip this part, and I encourage you not to. You can get away with skipping it more with pure wool felt because of the density of it, but I never would, because this is about beautiful finish. These could be little heirloom dolls. Certainly it's possible to make these as a series. They on sell very well, and you can make little play sets for them. So what I'm going to do now is the same tiny blanket stitch that I did on the ears. I'm going to sew all the way around the hood edge, right from the back and right the way around. So I start at the back. I've got my extra strong thread again, a single strand and knot in the end. I'm using a slightly darker colour than my felt, the same as I did on the ears, And certainly you can use any kind of coordinating or contrasting colours depending on your project. You might want to bring out a colour that's in the print of the body, and that works really well around the base of this hood. So I've got a knot in the end. I'm starting at the back because I can hide that knot in that seam and come through, and that will hold. And I'm simply going to make my way around, sewing that same tiny blanket stitch. And it binds the edge beautifully, gives it a professional finish, and it also helps pull in just slightly. It stops the felt from stretching. This little cap's going to be glued to the head, but it does stop the cap from stretching, so you get that lovely snug fit around the face. So I'm going to continue. That's my naughty dogs out there that you can hear. Naughty Pixar. And I'm going to continue on all the way around until I get back to my start point. So that completes the stitching on that little cap. You can see all the way around what a beautiful finish that is. That little head will sit in there. We add that last, but you can see that little hood will wrap around and do up under that chin beautifully. Now you can embellish this cap any way you like. I'm going to be adding probably just a little tiny flower here with a little bead, just to bring it all in together with my body fabric, but I will do that once we've made the body. So I can put this little cap aside now. Let's move on to making that body. Let's start on the body now. Now this body is for our basic play doll, our little play bead doll, and the body is made the same every time. So it's like a little onesie, very easy to put together, but put together in a very unique way. Just trimming off my threads there. Now the first thing that you want to do, you've got your two back pieces, that's what we start with, and I have gone ahead and sewn a close zigzag stitch on both of those openings. It's going to stop them fraying and it's going to stop them stretching. So between those opening marks, do that on both sides. Then we're going to put right sides together. We're going to line that up and we are going to sew the centre back seam, what will be the centre back seam of our doll. It's a 4mm seam allowance, and you're going to stitch to that opening. Make sure you back and forth a few times, and same with the top of the opening up to here. And you only need to sew it once, but I have my stitch length set to a 1.8, so it's a very tiny stitch. Once you've stitched that seam, I want you to take it to the iron and press the seam open and flat. I've pressed out that centre seam nice and flat, and also that opening. So there's the opening. So the opening is towards the top. And now we're going to do the tricky part. So we're going to take our front piece, which has our two marks on it, and we're going to line that up very close to the top there with the centre seam. You want to make sure that they are perfectly lined up. And then we're going to take our template of our little body, our heat erasable marker, and we're going to line that up nice and straight. Take a ruler if you have one to line it up with those two marks, and then you're going to trace around the entire outside edge. I hope you can see that. So I've traced all the way around. Make sure you leave a 0.5 centimetre at the top there for your seam allowance when we trim that off. So you can see I've thrown a couple of pins in so everything stays lined up and in each of the arms and the legs. So now I can take this to the machine, and rather than having to cut out two separate pieces and try and pin them all together, these little parts and these sweet little curves here, we can just stitch directly on the line all the way around with our little 1.8 stitch length, right the way around, all across the top. Go across the top section here a couple of times because we're going to put a hole through that for our neck joint, and it's much easier. You'll get a beautiful finish on all of those curves, way more professional, and it takes half the time. So now I'm going to go and stitch around that entire outside edge. So you can see there I've stitched all the way around. I've gone twice over the neck area and just made sure that little crotch seam has gone over a couple of times as well. So you can see, way easier to keep that stitching absolutely perfect. And now we're just going to go ahead and cut that one out. I'm leaving about a 4mm seam allowance all the way around. And you only need to sew it once because we're not adding any firm stuffing in this little doll. It's all very soft, and if you keep your stitch length to that 1.8, you'll find that's absolutely perfect. Once I've cut this out, I'm going to take it back to my iron just to remove those heat erasable marker marks. And now I've got the perfect little body stitched up with that centre back seam and that opening. Tricky, hey? So much easier. Now before I turn it through, I'm going to take my awl up into that opening and straight through that centre mark. I am going to make a hole ready for that neck joint. Just enlarge that a little. And then I'm going to turn this little one through. Easiest way I find is take your forceps in, tuck a little bit of that hand in, and just gently pull that through. Do the same with each of the arms and the legs. Just gently does it. And then the whole thing will pull through easily. Go in there gently with your needle and push out all those seams. Make sure that you take the time to roll out all of those seams because we're not stuffing this firm, so just roll them out so you've got your shape right. While that's nice and flat, you can go ahead and take your body template that you've got that has the arm sections marked in, make those marks, and then use your ruler and draw a line. Using my heat erasable marker again, I've drawn in those lines ready. We're going to stitch over those, but first we're going to add the little beads into the hands. So just a matter of slipping those in there. Like I said, that sized bead, that is about a 10 to 12 millimetre, seems to fit quite well. Just adjust them to sit nice. Same with the other side. You can do the feet at the same time if you want. Get those nicely into place. We're not going to add any stuffing into the arms at all because we want them to be able to fold over. When we stitch that seam, they'll be able to fold over nicely and have that cute little pose there. So make sure that bead is really pushed to the end. I'm taking a single strand of extra strong thread, and right where that bead finishes, I'm going to sew a running stitch all the way around that little wrist. Leave the tail ends hanging. I always start at the back and follow right the way around. Little stitches will pull it in better. And you do this the same on the legs as well. Till you get back to your start. You could do this with a double strand, but I find the single strands more than enough. Pull that in, and I'm simply going to knot that off. As I pull that in, it's going to really push that bead nice and snug to the end. We've got that nice little wrist happening there. Make sure it's super tight, knot that off at least 4 times. Then you can rethread your needle and just take the ends in and out and snip the thread ends so that they're completely hidden in there. So do the same with the other hand and do the little feet as well. Those little hands and feet are in place now, and now I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to stitch right over those lines that I made that will give me that nice little fold over for the arms. So do make sure that you back and forth on your start and finish to make sure that that's nice and secure. And so there we go, we've got the perfect little onesie body for any of my 30mm bead dolls. So this is the same for everyone in the series that uses the 30mm head, and you can see just how simple it is. Those little arms will fold in nicely now. Now if you want to add any embellishments to this doll at the front, it's a good idea to do it while you've got this back still open. So you can sew on any buttons or any little, I'm going to probably add just a little flower and a button, and I can still do that through that back opening. But that is your basic body for your 30mm bead doll. So I'm back with my little bear play doll, and I have added a little flower, embroidered flower. I've been able to get to that through that back opening. So I've just stitched the little embroidered flower with a little button that matches my project. So now we're going to be putting this little one together. I've also added a tiny felt flower with a bead to the top of that cap because I'm going to be making a little bear in that purple felt that's going to go with this little set. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take that head and we're going to attach it to the body. Very simple, just like adding any other head with a joint. We've already made that hole. We've got just enough room to get in there and add this head. I'm just going to make sure that joint hole is big enough. I'm going to take that through. You're going to make sure you've got all of that fabric pushed down around that bolt. Add that disc, or perhaps you've got a washer that you're using, and tighten that up. For now I'm just going to finger tighten it and check that I've got it all straight, nothing caught up there. Then I can get in there with my spanner and tighten that up properly. Check that's all good and that head is facing forwards, and now we've got the perfect jointed little doll. All I need to do is go ahead and add 1 drop of Supa Glue. I've got my Supa Glue here. I'm going to add 1 drop in here in the threads, stop that bolt ever coming adrift. With that head nicely joined and that glue dried, we can go ahead and just add a very small amount of filling to this doll. Now you could really plump them out, but I just like to fill the little legs. Not too much. I want them to be quite floppy and posable. But I do push it all the way down to the base there. I want it to be able to still be soft enough to bend in the middle. So just a little in the belly section. And then up around that neck bolt. just to support that head a little better. Give it a little bit of shoulder, but it's all quite soft. Because it's so small, the fabric tends to hold itself well. Want it to be quite squishy so that it can sit and bend. And now we're just going to go ahead and we're going to close that opening, which is really simple on this doll. Just that filling till you're happy with it. Have another look at that little cap. And you can see you get a lovely little result there. So let's go ahead and close that opening. So I'm just going to travel back and forth each time, going back into that last exit hole and pulling it in every couple of stitches, and it will nicely close that opening. It will be quite invisible. Just make your way down, all the way down to the bottom. So there we go, you should have a nice invisible seam closing there. Now our final step, of course, is to add that lovely little hood. So what we're going to do first, we're going to take a doubled strand of 8-ply pearl thread and we're going to sew a running stitch. It's done in a particular way. So we're going to start on the front side, right in the front corner, and sew a nice small running stitch, only about 4 millimeters in from the edge, all the way around. And when we finish, we want to come out on the top side as well, the same as here. I'll whiz around and show you. There you go. I've pulled up those gathers nice and snug around that neckline there. A little bit of clear craft glue on the back of the head has held that in place. And make sure you bring those front corners up to meet, and then we can knot that off a couple of times and then you can tie a sweet little bow. And there we go, that completes our gorgeous, very simple little #1 in a series, our little bear doll. And I'm actually going to make her a little teddy to match her flower. So the perfect teddy for her is the little one here that we've made on our charm. So I'm going to make this one up. I'm going to put the link to this tutorial up the top there for you. This is a bag charm that I made way back, but this is a perfect simple little teddy to put with this play series. And you can make it over and over again. So I'm going to be using that same purple felt and make up that little bear. You can see the size is absolutely gorgeous. You can imagine the colours that you can do with these little dolls. So let me get that little bear put together and then I will show you her all set up. So here's my little beauty all done, and now she's got her gorgeous little purple teddy. That's a really quick little make and it's fantastic for this series. I'm going to be creating so many little accessories like this for this range, and of course you can look forward to so many different little costumes. There's going to be little dinosaurs, you know, raccoons, foxes, all sorts of little outfits that you can swap and change. You'll end up with a whole collection. There's nothing that little kids like better. They fit beautifully into their hands. They've got a great weight because of the beads, and they also sit perfectly on my little armchair. So if you want to make a little play series up, you can add the little armchair. I've made a little blankie there so they can cuddle up together with Teddy. Pop them in there, cover up with the little blankie. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous little play set. And I'm sure that you'll find so many ways to use them. You think of all of the colours, you can coordinate everything. It's just really, really a great little project, and certainly amazing for on-selling. So you can make up sets of these, put them into gorgeous little gift boxes with beautiful wrapping, tissue paper, and they would be fabulous for online selling or market. So I hope you've enjoyed number 1 in the series. There are many more to come. So I'm looking forward to seeing your beautiful ideas and all of your lovely little embellishments. Well, how did you like that? I really loved it, and these need to come with a warning because they're terribly addictive, because they're just too easy to put together, and it's such a professional result at the end. So I'm really hoping some of you will take the concept on board, and as we move along and add different characters, that you can create your own heirloom doll product line. You could definitely sell them at markets or online through your online stores, and I encourage you to do that. You just can't sell the pattern itself, but I really wish you every success with that. So I'm going to be adding to this, and I can add to this collection way more frequently for you all, just because of the way it's put together and set up. Next one coming up, I'm going to give you a cute little bunny costume, so you'll be able to put that one together, and we'll have number 2, and it's going to grow rapidly. Trust me, it's something I just love to do in my downtime. So like I said, back to basics, refining those beautiful hand sewing skills. I think that's good for all of us. Thank you all so much for your support. I have really had a busy time with family. I apologise, as I said before, family has to come first for me, but we're playing catch up now. Thank you for appreciating Humpty Dumpty. All of those of you who've come over to my masterclass, a big welcome to you all. And all of you who are just here on Pay It Forward, I love to hear from you all. Join our Facebook page so you can share all your beautiful creations with us. And if you want to get my attention, you need to follow me on Instagram. That address is across your screen there now. That's where you'll catch me one-on-one. If I haven't seen or responded to a message or a post and you want me to see it, put it right in front of me on Instagram privately, and I will definitely contact you that way. So looking forward to seeing more ahead. I want a week of these little ones popping up. I'm so excited. I have some of you, I could name you, who are going to do amazing things with this little collection. I just know you will. All the little beading and the felt work. Anyway, I'm excited. I'll make some more too. So everybody have a creative week, and take care of yourselves. Thanks for your support, and keep on paying all those good things forward. Until next time, it is hooroo from me.